thing that is just a weird fear of mine is doctors pretending to be doctors. Like not actually having their licensure, but just playing the role and secretly killing people while doing so. And yes, this has happened before. The most haunted hotel in America is known as the Crescent Hotel. I don't know if anybody else can relate to this, but I loved staying up at night watching ghost hunters. I would run around with my little EMF detector seeing if I could find ghosts myself. Well, my favorite episode of Ghost Hunters actually covered the Crescent. They ended up actually making contact with one of the ghosts, but I never really deep dived into how creepy this hotel's history actually is. So the Crescent Hotel was built in 1986. And it was a resort for the wealthy, rich, and powerful. But pretty fast, they found this whole hotel to be very unmanageable. And it was weirdly very accident-prone in the building process. There was a stonemason named Michael who passed away, but we'll get to that later. Well, it reopened in 1908 as a college for girls. This photo gives me very much Midsummer vibes. While this college was considered prestige, they covered up a death. Part 2 to the Crescent Hotel. Well, one of the girls in this conservatory ended up falling for a guy. She ended up getting pregnant, and it was a huge deal during this time to be unwed and pregnant. On top of this, her dad forbade her from being with him. So she threw herself off the top of the building. The college completely covered it up, went about their business, and kept up with their high-priced tuition. But they only lasted until 1924. While all the way in Iowa, a man named Norman Baker was a radio host. Very eccentric, had a big personality. And while there isn't a whole lot of information on how he came to this conclusion, he decided that he was going to be a doctor, without any kind of license or experience. He claimed that he had discovered a variety of cures to numerous diseases, but it didn't take long for Iowa to figure out that he did not have the medical training, so they ran him out. Well, Mr. Baker was not giving up. And on his ventures where he could find a new place where he could cure people, he came across the Crescent. And in 1937, he opened the Baker's Cancer Curing Hospital. Hundreds of people checked into this hospital and hundreds did not check out. Part 3 to the Crescent Hotel. It honestly breaks my heart because so many sick and desperate people showed up to his hospital because he literally claimed that he had the cure. But what his cure was injections from a mixture of glycerin, alcohol, and tea from watermelon seeds and clover leaves. And these injections were apparently extremely painful and happening 5 to 7 times a day. Patients would be in severe pain. And when they started to get extremely sick, they would be separated off from everyone else in an annex that was once used as the servants' quarters from the hotel before. And to give some perspective on the creepiness of the hotel today, that place is now a suite that you can spend the night in. And Mr. Baker was considered to have killed about 300 people because there's 300 names that were never checked out. And he actually killed them indirectly because he made his nurses do all the injections. He actually couldn't stand the sight of any medical procedure. He somehow got recognized by the American Medical Association and ended up making millions in today's money. And after people would pass away, he would take them down to the morgue, which is now the basement of the hotel. Part 4 of the Crescent Hotel. So you can still go down to this basement and look at all the gurneys, the wheelchairs, the medical equipment, along with a ton of jars. Some of these are filled with his concoction, some are filled with human remains. And as they've continued to build along the area, they have found more of Norman's things. Just as recent as 2019, they were excavating the area and ended up finding 500 items that included more jars filled with human remains like tumors and also more of his little cure. As you can imagine, with all of the death that happened here, this place is extremely haunted. Listed as being one of the top hotels you don't want to stay at. There's so many accounts of people staying here and talking about their experience along with photos online, and people sharing just how frightening it is. Well, besties, I think we should go stay there. It's only 3 hours away from me, so I'm going to get in the car and I'm going to go drive. And I will be vlogging my experience for YouTube, which is linked in my bio. But in the meantime, if you want to hear about the specific ghosts that haunt this hotel, go to my Instagram, go to the middle reels tab. It's really interesting and you get to learn how people outside of the hospital passed away. On June 11th of 2014, 4 women and 1 man were indicted for illegally drugging men and charging thousands of dollars onto their credit cards in New York City strip clubs. Now, I know you guys have seen the movie Hustlers. I am a huge fan of J-Lo and I really wanted to look in the true story that went behind this movie. One of the really interesting things that I found out is that Samantha Barbash, who was played by J-Lo, actually wasn't a stripper at all. But Samantha Barbash, along with her friend Rosie Keough, ended up hustling over $200,000 from men and targeted doctors, lawyers, bankers, while leading a small ring of exotic dancers and strip club workers in a 4-month scheme. To provide a little bit of backstory, Rosie ended up dropping out of school at 17 to work at a diner. And this is really where she learned originally how to finesse for tips. But she was right next door to a strip club, and managers from the strip club would come in and eat at the diner. Some would even suggest that she should come work for them, offering her a job. And realizing that she could be making a lot more, she ditched that waitressing job, not knowing what was going to happen next. This is part 2 to the Hustlers case. So Rosie ended up starting her job at a strip club and was making about $2,000 to $3,000 each night. Thankfully, for one of the first times in media, strippers were being actually shown in high positive regard, so it was inviting a lot more people into the strip clubs. And many of the Wall Street bros, after a hard day's work of scamming people, would come in and spend a lot of money. And at one point, Rosie was making about 10 grand a night from hedge fund managers. Literally because she was making her tuition in one night, she was like, school can be on the back burner. However, because of the type of men that were coming in, they had an overall mistrust for guys. In addition to this, men also ran the clubs. And a lot of the times they were getting really ridiculous working hours. And on top of this, which I did not know, you had to pay just to be able to work at certain clubs. So she was being charged about $300 just to come in and work. Everything was pretty much taxed, so you pretty much had to pay these managers additional money if you wanted them to send good clients your way. As Rosie states in her interview, all the girls collectively snapped. And then this is when the financial crisis of 2008 hit. Part 3 to the Hustlers case. So in 2008, the financial crisis hit and people were losing businesses, their homes. Wall Street completely crashed and trillions of dollars of wealth were gone overnight. So all this money going into the strip clubs were now disappearing. The girls were desperate and looking for another way to bring in the big bucks. Rosie had met Samantha back in 2007. She was a single mom from the Bronx and she was a recruiter for the club. So she would go out, find men, and bring them back. And you would get a percentage of each dollar that this guy would spend at the club if you were the one that recruited him. While this process is legal, Samantha decided to have some other girls do this along with her, and it progressively got illegal. Rosie would go to very high-end bars, dressed in a blazer, befriend the men, acting like she's just one of them and got off of her job as well. She would keep an eye out for things like Rolexes or Black American Express cards, and sometimes the other girls would join as well. But they ended up drugging them with MDMA and ketamine, which is not at all like a typical roofie, it's way more dangerous. And they would charge up their cards to insanely high amounts. Part 4 to the Hustlers case. So this group of girls were really getting away with it because a lot of these guys had really high profile jobs or wives at home, so they would wake up the next day with this massive bill. They didn't want people to find out because it was at a strip club, so they would just pay it and move on. And sometimes whenever these guys were out there and the banks would flag it, the girls would actually pick up the phone pretending to be their assistant and confirm that the charges were legit. Samantha ended up setting her eyes on another victim, Dr. Yunin, who was a young cardiac surgeon from New Jersey. He was single, never married, and they really thought that he was the perfect target. They set him up on a date with another girl named Karina, who was obviously a part of this scheme, and they went on 3 dates total. The first 2 dates, he would wake up in the morning feeling kind of fuzzy, not really remembering, but he thought that he just overdrank. But by the 3rd date, he actually woke up with a call from American Express, stating that there was $100 grand in charges to his credit card at Robert's Steakhouse, which was a steakhouse at Scores, the strip club. Absolutely pissed, he called Karina and went off, and then he decided to take legal action. Part 5 to the Hustlers case. So after American Express ends up looking at the receipts and seeing that they're forged, Amex refuses to pay Scores. So Scores then sues Dr. Yunin and then he countersues. He states that he's never even been to this strip club, and that's when Scores ends up releasing CCTV footage of him being there, but obviously he was drugged so he doesn't remember. But the tabloids exploded. They were painting the picture that he just kind of spent too much money being drunk one night. So he went straight to the police, who had actually been aware of the scam for some time, but they needed a solid tip in order to put up a sting. So they end up sending in an agent to pose as a rich guy. And if you go to my Instagram Reels tab, there's a video over there that goes into detail on this sting operation. But ultimately, they were able to get enough evidence off of this to where they could take it to court and actually have the girls arrested. And it wasn't long till the girls started to make plea deals. Rosie was the first one to cooperate and she settled for 5 years of probation. Karina ended up serving 16 weeks at Rikers Island, along with 5 years probation. I want to know what y'all's thoughts are on this case. And go to my Insta if you want to see the extra video.
Again, am I out of my mind? Going out with friends, gonna have a good time. 'Cause you only